Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Learn French with Madame. Today, we are going to continue talking about adjective agreement, but today we're going to focus on some irregular adjectives. So in our last video, if you missed that lesson, we talked about how adjectives always have to agree in French with the gender that they're describing and the number that they're describing. So if you missed that video, here's a quick recap, and I'll put the link to that video in the description. But basically, if something is feminine, if we're describing a feminine noun, a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. So if we're describing something that's feminine, we need to add an E to our adjective. If we're describing something that's plural, we need to add an S to it. So that means if we're describing something that's feminine and plural, we would have to add two things, an E and then an S. Most of the time when I teach you guys adjectives, I teach it to you in the masculine form. So the masculine form you leave alone and you don't add anything unless it's masculine and plural when you would add an S. So if that little bit confused you, give the previous video a watch. Like I said, the link will be in the description. But let's start talking about some irregular adjectives that don't follow the rules that we just talked about. Okay, on y va. Here we go. So, like I said, there's quite a few adjectives in French that are called irregular because they don't have those normal endings that we just went over. The endings for these irregular adjectives are different and they can often change how something is pronounced. So, for example, if I wanted to say that she had long hair or she was long, I would say il est long. But if I want to say she was long, I would say elle est longue. So it can change how something is pronounced. So it's important to make sure that we get irregular adjective conjugations right and that we make sure that they match our noun that we're describing. Okay, so let's just dive right in. There's a lot of adjectives that can be grouped kind of into categories. So for example, this is one category where the masculine adjective ends in EUX. So as you can see, I have three examples right here, three adjectives. We have sérieux, généreux, and paresseux. So everything that's going to end in EUX has that sound on the end. So sérieux for serious, généreux for generous, and paresseux for lazy. Now to make these ones feminine, we can't just add an E. Because of that EUX, we have to add something different. So it's going to change the pronunciation completely. If it's ending in EUX, to make it feminine, we have to take off that X and add SE. So if the adjective ends in EUX for the masculine, for the feminine, it's going to end in EUSE. No, that's kind of a lot. So this is going to take a lot of practice. So for example, we have sérieux. If I wanted to say he is serious, I would say il est sérieux. But if I wanted to say that she was serious, I would have to change it and say elle est sérieuse. So we go from that y sound to uz on the end. So sérieux to sérieuse, généreux to généreuse, and paresseux to paresseuse. So that EUX is going to change to EUSE when it's feminine. This is not all of the adjectives that end in EUX. These are only a couple examples, but pretty much every adjective that ends in EUX is going to follow this same rule. So it may look like a lot, but once you know that adjectives that end in EUX are going to change to EUSE for the feminine, you'll be pretty good to go and can do most of those adjectives. Okay? So here's a second group of adjectives. Adjectives that end in IF if they're masculine. So for example, I have two examples up here, créatif and sportif. So créatif is creative. If I say il est créatif, he is creative. Or il est sportif, he is sporty or athletic. Now I'm going to change that to IVE for the feminine. So IF is the masculine and IVE is the feminine. So we go from créatif to créative and sportif to sportive. Now, if I'm wanting to make these plural, all I have to do is add an S onto the end of these. So for the masculine, if I wanted to say the boys are sporty or athletic, I could say ils sont sportifs with an S. Same thing if I wanted to say the girls were athletic, I could say elles sont sportives with an S on the end there. I have a little hint that will help you remember this. It's a little rhyme. So IVE goes with la fille. So feminine adjectives will like this will end in IVE. And la fille we learned was the girl. So if you can remember IVE goes with la fille, then hopefully that will help you remember for adjectives that end in IF, we have to switch them to IVE. So IVE goes with la fille. And once again, this is not all of the adjectives that end in IF. If I wanted to list all of the adjectives, we would be here for forever. So I only listed a couple, but like I said, they can be grouped into these categories. So once you know this category, you can do all of the adjectives that end in IF and switch them to IVE. Okay, la prochaine, here are some pretty irregular adjectives. If it ends in an L, like example, gentil, to make it feminine, we need to double that last letter and add an E. And the same thing goes with gros and mignon, cute. So we've got gentil, which is nice or kind, gros, which is fat, and mignon, which is cute. So for all three of these, if it ends in an L, an S, or an N, we're going to double that last letter. So double the L, double the S, or double the N, and then add an E to make it feminine. So we have gentil and gentil. That doesn't really change the pronunciation. Gros and gross. That does change the pronunciation. We've got mignon and mignon. It just draws out the N a little bit more. But for this category, the main thing to know is if it ends in L, S, or N, we're going to double the L, S, or N and add an E. To make these plural, all I have to do is add an S onto the end, except if it already ends in an S. So for example, grow, I would not add an S to make it masculine and plural because it already ends in that S. Just like how in our last video, we talked about if something ends in an E already, we don't add another E to make it feminine. So we just leave it alone if it already ends in an S if we want to make it plural. But for all the rest of these, to make them plural, we would just add an S. Okay, so here are some that are 100% irregular. I know, of course, they are going to be your favorite adjectives in the whole wide world, but we have long and longue, blanc and blanche. So these ones are very irregular, and unfortunately, I do not have a trick up my sleeve to help you remember them other than you just have to memorize it. It's just one of those things in French that you just have to commit to your brain and make a little spot for it so it never leaves. But long changes to longue and blanc changes to blanche. There is kind of a little bit of a trick that if things end in G, if it's an adjective, to make it feminine, you'll add UE. And then for things that end in C, to make it feminine, you're going to add HE. So long to longue, blanc to blanche. Okay? There's more that we're going to learn on irregular adjectives later on, but that is all that I wanted to talk about for those ones for right now. We'll talk about more completely irregular ones later. There are some that don't change at all, so we don't even have to do anything to them. So, for example, orange stays the same if it's feminine, if it's singular, if it's plural, if it's masculine. It stays the same. You don't make any changes whatsoever. The same thing with marron. So for orange, orange, and marron, brown, we are not going to make any changes at all. We leave it alone regardless if it's feminine or plural or singular or masculine. It stays the same no matter what. All right, and then I left a little fun fact in there for you. So une orange is an orange, like the fruit, and des marrons are chestnuts, like the nut they would eat around Christmas time. So if you wanted to know, there's a little fun fact in there for you. But those two are never going to change at all. Okay, so now I want to ask you some questions and I want you guys to practice. So, les directions, donnez-moi la bonne forme de l'adjectif. Give me the correct form of the adjective. All right, so here we go. Adjective up at the top, and then our sentence. Les élèves sont très, and you've got to conjugate or change gentil for les élèves. Okay, so we could have put two different things here. We could have just added an S onto the end of gentil to make it masculine and plural. Or if you wanted to make it feminine and plural, I didn't really specify. You could have doubled the L, added an E, and then added an S. So you needed to put, if you're making it feminine, L-E-S onto the end. So gentil, L-E-S. Très bien. La prochaine, we have ennuyeux. Ennuyeux is boring. So, les filles ne sont jamais, and you've got to change ennuyeux. So, tell me what ennuyeux should be. For the feminine, it should be ennuyeuse. Ennuyeuse. So, remember, adjectives that end in EUX are going to end in EUSE if it's feminine. And because this is talking about more than one, we needed to add an S to the end as well. Okay, aussi, les chats sont très, and then orange. Tell me what form of the adjective we should put for orange. I leave it alone. I don't change it. Nice job. I leave it alone and I don't make any changes. La prochaine, Samantha a les cheveux, and our adjective is brun. Samantha a les cheveux, and then brun. What form of this adjective should I put? Oui, brun with an S. That's the only thing that I changed to it because remember, our adjective agrees with what we are describing. We are not describing Samantha, we're describing her hair. So brun needs to agree with cheveux. La prochaine, we have créatif and les filles sont. So you've got to change créatif for les filles. Aussi, Gaston et Marc ont les cheveux en court. Do me a favor and change court to les cheveux. It should be court with an S. So court is going to agree with les cheveux, not Gaston and Marc. But in this case, it's still masculine and plural. So remember that we're describing les cheveux, not Gaston and Marc. Okay? La prochaine, tu as des cheveux très, and our adjective is long. Tu as des cheveux très, and then our adjective long. Tell me what the form of the adjective long should be. Excellent. Long just with an S. Très bien. Remember, des cheveux or les cheveux is masculin and pluriel because you have more than one hair. So remember, we just have to add an S for this one. Aussi, Gaston et Gilles ne sont pas très. And we've got sportif. We've got to change our adjective sportif to match our subjects Gaston and Gilles. All we do is add an S. It is already in the masculine sportif. We know masculine ends in IF and IVE goes with la fille for feminine. So for this one, all we have to do is make it plural and add an S. Prochaine, elle a les yeux marrons. Elle a les yeux marrons. What do I do to the adjective marron? Nothing. I leave it alone. Marron is one of those adjectives that never, ever, ever changes. I leave it alone. So I leave it just as how it's up there on the screen. La prochaine, la table est très, and our adjective is long. What should I do for our adjective long? Excellent. I need to add a U and an E, a U and an E to make it feminine. Okay, est-ce que ta mère est âgée? What do I have to do to that adjective âgée? I need to add an E to make it feminine. So ta mère is what we are describing, your mom. So we need to describe our mom and say âgée with an extra E onto the end there. Okay, combien avez-vous? How many did you have? Il y en a 12 possibles. There were 12 that were possible. See how you did. All right, I hope we did pretty well. If you didn't, give this video another watch through and hopefully you'll be able to get some more right. Mais c'est tout pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today. Si vous avez des questions au sujet des adjectifs et l'accord, if you have any questions about adjectives and their agreement, envoyez-moi un email. Mais c'est tout pour aujourd'hui et à plus!